What is the next book going to be about? Is the next book, how could you possibly expand on everything that you went through over the past 20 years to create this book?
Believe it or not, it wouldn't be that difficult. First of all, for your listeners, if they don't know anything about the book, I don't want it to be oversold. It doesn't answer the biggest questions it raises. Basically, that's why it took so long. I kept looking for a smoking gun to prove the theses. There's more than one in here. And my agent kept telling me after like the first 5 or 6 years, you've got enough stuff. You don't have to prove everything. You definitely completely blow apart the official versions of the Manson murders, the reason for the murders, the fact that there were more people involved in the commission of them and the manipulation of Manson. That's huge. That's enough. But I was never satisfied because I always felt like I was, one day away. Going on and on and on.
Yeah,
so
that's what keeps you going, right?
Yeah, for better or worse. So what I've gotten since the book came out is I've gotten a lot more substantiation. It's like building a pyramid and I'm almost at the top. And I'm thinking, I told Dan, my collaborator, a week or two ago, I said, I think if I can get a few more things in the next month, then I can stop and we can go and start on it. If not, I do think we have enough anyway, even if I don't get it, but I'll still want a little more time. We didn't write anything about the Sirhan case in the book, the assassin of Robert F. Kennedy. The assassination occurred about a year and a month before the Tate murders in Los Angeles. And the same cops, same attorneys, same players, and I uncovered a lot of new and pretty compelling information proving that Sirhan was a Manchurian candidate, somebody who was programmed to be in the pantry. Believe me, I'm not the first one to do that. A lot of really respected writers and authors have been trying to get this case reopened for years. I have some new information, but we couldn't link it to the main psychiatrist in our book who we allege manipulated Manson. He was a good candidate, but I said without linking it, it would have been 2 or 3 whole chapters that wouldn't have stayed on our narrative through line in the book. So when we do the new book, I think I will be able to link it. And that's one thing, for instance, that'll be in the new book, and also the Jonestown case, with Jim Jones and the mass suicides in Guyana. Wow. All this stuff happened in the Patty Hearst kidnapping.
Right.
So it's basically just kind of unraveling a lot of stuff that are pretty much landmark historic crimes in the United States that occurred in the 60s, and I try to stop in the 70s,
right,
that were presented to us by media, a media that was complicit with the government and the CIA to cover up truth and realities of how many of these things were provoked.
How frustrating is it knowing that there is evidence out there that basically would give you the answers to all this book, like what is it? The guy Tex Watson. There's recordings of him. There's tapes that are somewhere that you just can't get your hands on. But it must be so frustrating to know they're there and they exist.
Yeah, that actually the book kind of ends with me trying to get those tapes, and I won't spoil the story, but that was incredibly frustrating. I hope that comes through in the book because number one, I discovered these tapes existed, that they were in a safe in an attorney's closet in Texas that he had kept since November of 1969. And it was, what he had told me were 20 hours of audio tape of Tex Watson, Manson's kind of right-hand man who did most of the killing and all the murders. Manson was absent from the murder scenes.
Right.
The second night of the LaBianca murders, he tied them up,
and then
told the others what to do, but left before the murders happened. So Tex, before anyone knew who he was, who the Manson family was, they weren't in the papers yet. Only the police considered them suspects, had been detained. He had fled home to his little town in Texas where he was from, and the LAPD wanted to interview him as a suspect. So they called up his cousin, who was a lawyer in the small town that he lived in, and he was the sheriff of that town. And the cousin agreed to take his nephew into custody while the 2 LAPD cops came down. And he called a lawyer, Bill Boyd, and Bill Boyd came over and said, I'll represent him. And he said, what are these guys coming down here to talk to you about? And he said, I have no idea. And he goes, well, something happened in Los Angeles. And he said, it beats me. So the two cops came down and sat down with the lawyer, Tex, his parents, and his uncle, the sheriff. And they said, where were you on the night of August 8th, 1969, August 9th, 1969? And the others put it together. And someone said, are you talking about the Sharon Tate murder? And he said, I never knew her, had nothing to do with that. So Bill Boyd said to the others, can I have a few moments alone with them? And they said, yeah, so they left. And then he said to Tex, he said, Charles was his real name. He said, Charles, this is pretty serious allegations. I want you to think about it and then answer as honestly as you can these detectives' questions, and I'll represent you and make sure you don't go to the death penalty. Because he already knew, he could tell that he was getting caught up in some lies. So they left Tex alone for an hour or two, and then Bill went back to see Charles, and again alone, just one-on-one. He said, do you know what these men are here for? And he goes, you know that girl Sharon Tate, that actress that they mentioned? He goes, yeah. He goes, I killed her. And he said, okay, I'm going to tell them you're not talking to them, but that I'm going to represent you. So he said, you're done with my client. You can come back, with a subpoena or whatever, but right now he's my client. I don't want him answering any questions. So then he went and recorded Charles for 2 days, just telling everything about how he met Manson, what other people were around. And I called him, this lawyer, in 2008, I think, to interview him. And he made the mistake during the interview of telling me, I have these tapes that nobody's ever heard, and they were before anything had been written in the newspaper, so they're probably like the purest account of what really happened. Charles was so honest, and he just talked for about 20 hours. And he said he even described other murders that the police had never learned about. And the minute he said that, I thought, number one, he's implicating his former client, who's always your client, in other murders. And number two, he's never going to let me hear those tapes.
Right.
So when I said, so you're talking about murders that the police hadn't discovered? And he said, yeah, other murders. And then all of a sudden he realized what he was saying. And he goes, not that Charles had committed, but that Charles was aware the others had done. And I said, well, who were they? He goes, well, I haven't listened to them in, I guess then it was like 40 years. He goes, I know there were a couple bikers they killed, and I was already looking into these missing bikers who had been last seen with the group in Death Valley. And I said, Mr. Boyd, is there any chance I could come down and listen to the tapes? And then he got really nervous, because then all of a sudden he's realizing he violated his confidentiality. He said, well, I couldn't do anything without Charles' permission, but I'll ask him. And then that was it. He wouldn't take my phone calls. His secretary would always say, he had no time to see him, he's traveling. And after like 3 months of blowing me off, I told the secretary to tell him I was going to write to Charles in prison, tell him what he said, and ask for an interview. And she had just told me he was in China on business. So she said, I'll tell him. And she hung up, and the phone rang a minute later. And my caller ID said McKinney, Texas. And it was him on the phone. Don't you dare write to my client. If you say that I said all that, I'll deny it. God damn it. And I said, but you said it all on audio tape. He said, I didn't give you permission to tape me. I said, not only did you give me permission, you did it on tape. God damn it. So he died 2 months later of a heart attack on a treadmill at about age 68 or 7, I think. I hope that had nothing to do with it.
Oh, you definitely did.
Long story short, the tapes went into, his firm had gone bankrupt. So they went to the bankruptcy court, and for about 2 years, I tried to get the court to release the tapes to me rather than put them up for auction or destroy them or whatever they were going to do. And again, it's a very long story, but I'll keep it short. The trustee in charge of them ended up contacting the deputy DA in Los Angeles, who knew what I was doing and really wanted the tapes too, and was kind of advising me. And I said, if you don't think I'm legit, you can get in touch with him. So she did. And then, of course, stupidly, I was naive enough to think that that wouldn't ruin my chances. But sure enough, Patrick Sakura arranged to get the tapes from her. And he had always promised me that the minute, if he got them first, I would sit down with him and listen to them for the first time.
Who is Patrick?
He was the deputy DA who was in charge of all the parole hearings for the Manson family. So he called me up really excited. He said, I can't believe it. They're going to release the tapes to me, but we can't let the press know, because if the press finds out and Tex finds out, he's going to stop it. But somebody down there in Texas found out. Oh no, the trustee told Watson's current attorney because she had to. I don't know why Patrick thought that wasn't going to happen. So then Watson immediately went to court to stop the tapes from being released. And then there was a 2 or 3 year process from the county court to state court to state Supreme Court, where they finally decided that the tapes should be released. And then the LAPD and the DA's office got them, and then they wouldn't talk to me anymore. And to this day, they're sitting in a vault, because I believe those tapes tell the truth about why things happened, how they really happened, and who was behind the scenes manipulating Manson.